Go to the top. I used to be given records at a very early age indeed. People would buy them in an entirely random way, and so you'd get all kinds of things, the Bing Crosby records and stuff. But I used to listen to them at home, obviously, but had nobody to listen to them with, living right out in the country. Stepping in the dog trap. Carefully with my child, Melissa, please. Left-hand drive, very posy. When I was about 11 or 12 and was listening to Radio Luxembourg and to the American Forces Network in Europe, I thought how splendid it would be to have a job playing records that I liked on the radio, which is, in essence, is all I do now. You know, people try and look for something more significant than that, but there really isn't anything.
More than 40,000 council tenants at Wakefield in West Yorkshire are to have their rents cut to less than £2 a week. The scheme takes advantage of an apparent loophole in new housing laws, though government officials are expected to try to plug any gap in the legislation. Well, that's it. More news on 1FM at 10 o'clock.
Hello again, millions of listeners. On tonight's programme, we have a session for you from new fast automatic daffodils. They're first for the programme. Ever since I started doing radio programmes, people have asked me to identify what it was in the music that I found attractive, and I've never really been able to come up with an answer to that. I mean, I think at the heart of anything that's good, you know, there should be something, there should be a kernel of something that's indefinable. And I think if you can define it, or claim to be able to define it, then, in a sense, you've missed the point. Two purple hazes for the price of one, or should the plural be purple's haze? No matter. That was Snuff, anyway, the second of the two from the LP. Snuff said, well, but gore blimey gov and all of that. What I like is, in a way, confrontational music. I mean, I like the idea of stuff that is going to stop. I'd sooner have people, for example, driving home in the car or something like that if they've got the radio on, thinking, what the hell is that? If there's nothing good on the radio, then I listen to demo tapes. So there's a demonstration of this. We have one by a local band. I'm very skillful at driving with one hand, sometimes with none, while I sort these out. If I ever get killed in a car crash, you'll know it'll be because I've been trying to read the name of some band, like Edible Vomit, to the back of a lorry. And they've actually got as far as giving their demo tape a title. Now that's what I call Chunder. And they are a local band from Hitcham, just down the road. These bumps giving you problems, are they? It sounds promising so far. That's one of the things that I liked about the punk era, was that bands were perfectly happy just to, you know, make a record and then see that as being not the first step in an elaborate career that was going to take them to American stadia, but in fact as far as they wanted to go. But there's nothing wrong with that, you know. They've done more. I've never made a record. Have you? We were unhappy in London. I don't really like London very much. People tell me there are parts of it that are delightful and village-like and so forth, but I'd rather live in a village than in somewhere that's village-like in the middle of a big city. So I don't like, I'm not happy being in London. Sheila would confirm, I get very, if I have to stay in London overnight, I get very upset and very miserable and so forth. So we've never regretted for a minute coming to live out here. There's the vomiting, I think. Nice boys, sensitive. dread the day, which people say is bound to happen, but I don't see why it should, when things come along that I genuinely don't like, and so there's absolutely nothing at all that I feel that I want to play on the radio. If that happens, then obviously I shut up shop and become a museum, but I don't really want that to happen. Because I like doing radio programmes, but I don't think I'd like to do radio programmes that were based on the kind of remember this golden gasser from yesteryear kind of principle. Well, I was born 4 days before the war began. That's the Second World War. Well, I was packed off to kindergarten at the age of 4, and it was back in the days when you did sort of like proper learning from the first day. You know, it's none of your 2 years of action painting and stuff. I seem to remember being taught the days of the week in French in my first week. And I did very badly there, so much so that the headmistress got my name wrong when she compiled the reports at the end of the term. And if I ever write my autobiography, it'll be called Robin Has Failed to Make Much Impression, because that was what she said about me. Then at the age of 7, I was packed off to boarding school in North Wales, which was, I think, a sort of sad thing to have happened, really, because my dad had just come home from the war, and it was really the first time that I'd met him. I mean, I'd obviously seen him as a baby, because there are pictures of him holding me, but I don't remember that. At the age of 12, took my common entrance, failed it, in fact, but because my father and his brother and both grandfathers and lots of other ancestors had all gone on to Shrewsbury, they kind of nodded me through. And I was at Shrewsbury, so I went into the third form, which was for really like the educationally subnormal, virtually. I mean, it was very, it was just a kind of catch-all thing for the truly hopeless. And I even managed to come bottom of that my first term, which I thought was quite an achievement. And of course, Winston Churchill, I think, was bottom of his school. So there's an interesting historical precedent for him. And I thought it gave me a certain distinction, you know, because there's only one person could be top and there's only one person that could be bottom, and I was it. My father didn't take the same enlightened view of it at all. It had been said to me that if you don't work hard, you won't go to university. But I had this view of university as being the kind of place where you'd have to stand on a 400-year-old oak table and sing There Was a Tavern in the Town in Latin and be pelted with bread rolls. So when they said to me, you know, if you don't work, you won't go there, I thought, terrific, you've given me the secret of eternal happiness. And also I was by nature a lazy, rather dozy child anyway. Most of my colleagues have gone on to be Lords Lieutenant of counties and things like this, or running ruthless businesses in the city. But my housemaster at Shrewsbury, realising that I wasn't going to be very good at any of those sort of things, encouraged me to be my own man and actually to play noisy records in the study and annoy everybody.
Gone to the darkness to talk and rhyme with my chaotic soul.
I went to the clinic just the other day. I had to find out, but the doctor's got to say. He said, boy, don't be ashamed to cry.
There's only 2 venues in Norwich that I know of that will play small bands. And we're banned from one of them.
I said, I know I should have used a rubber mate. He said, I think you've left it a little too late. He sat there with his notes on his lap. He said, I'm sorry, boy, but you got the clap.
Can you tell us about John Peel?
He's a brilliant gig. Yeah, it's great. He really is, because like it's sort of like Snake Palm Death and stuff like that, and he's like made him sort of known basically. He sort of doesn't just go for all the sort of stuff that's commercialised and so on.
You're not beautiful yourself.
Yes, Dave. Slightly bald, not particularly slim.
I'm a great believer in setting your sights low. I realise that this is a gross heresy in the expanded Europe of the 1990s, because we're all supposed to be terribly thrusting and greedy and grasping and ambitious. But I'm not one of those parents who, wants the children to be doctors or lawyers or anything special like that. I mean, I just want them to find something, as I have, that I like doing, at which you can earn a reasonable living, but which will give you an immense amount of enjoyment.
We don't have pocket money, that's why.
You don't need pocket money because you're so generously...
Where do we get our money from then?
You're so generously provided for by a benevolent parent that you don't need... My dad said to me, what are you going to do when you finish your national service? And I did that kind of, I don't care, what am I going to do, just sit around? And he said, I'll send you to America if you'll go. So I did a kind of, oh, OK, go ahead, send me. And then a few months later, I found myself on board the SS Eugene Lykes bound for Houston. It was too late to say, hey, Dad, I was only kidding, So I went to Texas and had at the back of my mind the possibility that I might get onto the radio, which indeed I managed to do in 1961. I eventually got a full-time radio job in Oklahoma City at KOMA, Oklahoma. Did 18 months there. Applied for a job in San Bernardino, California, and got it. Don't ask me why, because I didn't send an audition tape, which is probably just as well, and was given a job there. Did 18 months in San Bernardino and then came back here. I volunteered to do the 2 shifts because somebody had to do the midnight to 2 shift, and then realising that nobody on board the ship or indeed in the offices in London was listening to the radio at that time of night, I just dispensed entirely with the format and started playing some of the records that I'd brought back from California, and then things like early Pink Floyd and Hendrix and stuff like that. There's an incredible string band. Called the programme The Perfumed Garden, and it became enormously popular. I still meet, if I go to Germany, I still meet, hello, people, I remember, I hear in the Perfumed Garden many times. So people still remember that, people of a certain age. So it gave me a bit of a boost when Radio 1 started.
Just for fun, music too much. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the exciting new sound of Radio 1.
There were 6 of us competing for 2 jobs, ultimately for 1, on a programme called Top Gear. Tommy Vance was one of them, Pete Drummond, and then I can't remember the others, to be honest. But I had the inside track because the producer, Bernie Andrews, had similar sort of tastes to me and wanted me to be the presenter of the programme. So I've been there ever since, actually. I was a hippie in a rather naive way. I genuinely believed that by exchanging flowers with soldiers and things like this, the world was going to be set to rights, which was plainly mad. Well, I'm just too shy a bloke, really, to fully involve myself in stuff. Whenever I go into a restaurant, I always take a corner table with my back to the wall, because I just like to sit and watch what's going on, And then, as I say, in the hippie period, I tried to participate, but if somebody had said, come to the love-in or something like this, I'd have been too self-conscious, really, for that kind of thing.
John Peel, top DJ of the year. I would imagine that you were a little surprised, or weren't you?
Astonished, as a matter of fact, yes. I don't know exactly how significant it is,
Because you're quite unlike most of the other disc jockeys in style. You're not frenetic, you're not jokey, you're not really terribly matey, I would say, in your manner. Is this a studiedly deliberate approach?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just sort of me. I've never really seen myself as a rebel. I would like to have been a rebel. I don't think there's any value to DJs really expressing their opinion on the radio in that way.
John Peel, the stormy petrel of Radio 1, who infuriated Harold Wilson when the government's Biafra policy was criticised on his programme.
If I've done anything at all, I've tried to imply by the kind of music that I like and play and the records that I select, a certain kind of socio-political attitude, if you like, which I sometimes think is more effective than making direct statements, because I'd like to create an atmosphere which goes some way towards encouraging people to question what is going on around them rather than accepting everything that they're told as at its face value.
Well, I don't know best I can, I want my crown. Yes, I don't know best I can, I want my crown. Everybody in the neighborhood say that boy's been good. Yes, I don't know best I can.
In the 70s, the bands that had either been around for a very long time, relatively speaking, been around for a very long time, or new bands that were made up from people who'd been in previously successful bands that had broken up. So really, nothing new was coming through at all. People were becoming more and more obsessed with musicianship, which has never really been at the heart of popular music, or the best of it. So when I first heard the Ramones, because of the sort of intensity and nakedness of it all, you were quite frightened by it. So obviously, if I turned out in like bondage gear and stuff, and what was left of my hair worked into a kind of rather unsuccessful Mohican, people would have laughed themselves sick, and quite rightly so. But because I wasn't trying to do that, and I was just sort of, as it were, just passing the word on, people were prepared to accept it, which is fine. I'm powerfully motivated by guilt, and don't ask me why, because I've never understood why, but I always feel very guilty about almost everything, which is one of the reasons why I don't stop working. And, so I mean, even if I take time off to play football with the children or something, I feel as though I shouldn't be doing it.
It's the sex in her eyes I see, not hostility.
Caught the goalkeeper out of position there.
I didn't get to die!
Having children hasn't mellowed me, but then why should it? I find that I'm probably more indignant now, I think because I know more. And yes, I get, I think, angrier rather than less angry. I certainly don't feel as though I'm mellowing.
The UEA's decision to award him a degree came out of the blue. So why does he think that he's been honoured?
I'm not entirely sure why I've been so honoured. Obviously, I'm very flattered that I have been. I didn't like to ask them in case they said, actually, that's a very good point. You know, why are we giving this fat twerp this degree?
Chancellor, I present to you John Field for the degree of Master of Arts honoris causa.
It was an immense honour. It was, I think, probably the most extraordinary day of my life. Certainly something I shall never forget. I'd anticipated feeling hopelessly out of my depth throughout the proceedings, but in fact I didn't, and that made it even more wonderful because I actually felt I can cope with this, you know, and I don't feel inferior to all of these people to whom I expected to feel inferior. I think it's a little bit embarrassed by all of this. Well, it was very flattering to be asked to do Desert Island Discs, you know. It's almost like being mentioned in the New Year's honours list. Except, of course, to be mentioned in the honours list these days, you know, it's not something that happens to an honourable person. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but more of a compliment, I think, to be asked to do Desert Island Discs.
Now, can you choose one of those 8, which is more important to you than any of the others?
Well, a lot of them are kind of down things, aren't they? Or things which would make me moody and introspective, and perhaps it would be not a good idea to have those with me.
But
so
you are moody and introspective.
Yes, but I don't think it would be healthy for me to be like that on an island by myself. I might do myself a mischief, ultimately. So I'd have to take something which cheered me up, which would leave either the Four Brothers or the Undertones. And I think because I've known the Undertones for so long, and I've always claimed that it was my favourite record of all time, I'd have to take Teenage Kid. think we've got winners now for our exciting competition. I suffer from the one thing which I wanted to avoid doing or being, which is an absentee parent, but alas, I am at the moment an absentee parent. I think in the 1990s I've got to back off a little bit, otherwise I'm going to drop dead, because I do work virtually around the clock, you know. When I'm awake, I'm working. And as the children grow up, I seem to be seeing less and less of them rather than more and more of them. And as a result of this, it looks very likely that I shall have to stop doing the Radio Cambridgeshire programmes just so I can have my Sunday nights at home. One of the records he wanted to hear was Stiff Little Fingers, Nobody's Hero, and there's a version of it that occurs rather neatly on a Peel Sessions LP, which I'm about to play you now. What happens with the demo tapes is that people often send you stuff like this, you see. Pictures of moody-looking blokes, usually with the best-looking one thrust to the front. On this occasion, well, they've obviously decided not to do that. But all of this goes in the bin. All that actually matters is the tape.
Get the tape done as well, which is of a reasonable quality.
Now, I'm real depressed, but it could be worse. I could be in a box. In the back of a hearse.
Well, on the evidence of it so far, I mean, obviously the sound quality is appalling, but that doesn't matter a great deal because when I listen to tapes, I'm not listening for clever stereo effects and things like that. But on the evidence of this, it's the kind of tape which they'll be able to play to their grandchildren and say, "You never believe this, but Grandad used to be in a band." But I don't think that, because I'm sure they themselves don't think it's their passport to fame and fortune. A certain bizarre charm, as a matter of fact. I'm a very sentimental bloke, unfortunately. I mean, I cry terrifically easily, and I mean, there used to be a television programme called something like The Little House on the Prairie, and Sheila used to dread me watching it because she used to think she was going to have to like hose me down at the end of it, because it was appalling sentimental little kids in sort of frilly dresses and things getting into crises week after week, and I used to end up sobbing every single time. I'm glad that it's no longer shown. I like the fact that they're receptive to a very wide range of influences at the moment. William likes the thrash bands and so on, but then goes off and plays alto saxophone, and it's lovely because I think people of those ages haven't sort of chosen up sides yet. You know, they haven't decided yet that they're kind of mods or rockers. Well, we're off to see Extreme Noise Terror in Ipswich at the Caribbean Centre, where they have quite a few thrash gigs, hardcore gigs, whatever you want to call them. But, I mean, they're not very elegantly turned out, let's say. But there's never any sense of impending danger, even if you're rather, you know, obviously there aren't that many 50-year-old blokes there with their wives and sons. But I like the atmosphere there a great deal. And in a way I should feel terribly conspicuous if I was being filmed in there, because in a way that would set me apart from the rest of them. People say, you know, why is this fat showbiz twerp being filmed in our club? And it would destroy the delicate social balance, I think, more than somewhat. So it's probably best if we just film the band. Extreme Noise Terror are, I believe, going to go to Japan fairly soon, and I know that other bands, like I think Napalm Death and Heresy, have actually been and played in Japan, and Japanese bands have come over here, and it's something that they've sorted out entirely amongst themselves. I'm sure they've not filled in all the necessary and correct immigration applications and the musicians' union and this and that and stuff. Well, the Japanese bands have been over here, and I think that's extraordinary to be able to bring an entire band over here and arrange a little tour around Britain and make enough money out of it to cover costs. I think that's really a rather remarkable thing to do.
sort of people. They'll just go down the pub and go to nightclubs. But I mean, like, our
go
weekends...
to Wembley and pay a fortune for a ticket, whereas we like the bands and go travel around anywhere and see them for 250 or whatever and play money to charity.
Punk. Ipswich is full of punks.
One of the things I like about it is there is a genuine sense of community, you know, in a rather old-fashioned, even a kind of hippified way. Most of the people there are probably vegetarian, hunt saboteur types. It is a genuine counterculture. It exists entirely independently of everything, including the record industry and radio and so forth. I mean, they send me records, but only as an afterthought. And an interesting aspect of it, too, is that some of the bands that were featured on the programmes in session have come in for a certain amount of criticism for kind of compromising themselves, you know, involving themselves with me and Radio 1. I quite like that kind of attitude.
I would like to see that happen to ENT. I mean, hopefully it won't, you know.
But the boys got their heads screwed on, so they'll be able to do whatever for themselves.
To me, there's no inconsistency in liking this sort of music just because I'm 50, because if you're interested in the theatre or cinema or literature or something like that, nobody says, well, you're 50 now, son, you've got to just go back to reading Biggles books.
Love, it's a lot like sushi.
There's still this preoccupation with the 60s, as though the 60s was the only period that actually mattered and that everything else has sort of been irrelevant since then, or been of secondary importance, which I find most irritating. No, it doesn't sound very good. Now, it seems to me to be a perfectly natural and normal condition to prefer to hear new things rather than to listen to the same old things over and over again. I mean, I'm aware that most of my contemporaries still think, you know, if all you have to do is listen to the radio, frankly, and hear more Beatles records than any other group. It's ludicrous, you know. You think the Beatles were still alive. They broke up 22 years ago or something like that. It's as though when Radio 1 went on the air, we'd concentrated on playing Glenn Miller records. People would have thought we were mad. You know, people don't read the same newspapers. They don't give a pile of 1965's newspapers and read those over and over and over again. Wilson government to go, shock. You know, I mean, people just don't do that. I don't see myself as having influenced a generation. I don't think that the role of the disc jockey could ever be that profound. You have this strange culture in Britain where DJs and weather forecasters and newsreaders are celebrities, as is demonstrated by the fact that you're filming me now, you know. But this means that there is a danger that you can move into a community where they see you as being somebody worthwhile and important, and your wife becomes John Peel's wife and your children become John Peel's children. That genuinely has not happened here because the children and Sheila are sort of strong individuals in their own rights. It genuinely is the case that it's more like, who's that miserable bugger over in the corner? Oh, that's Sheila's husband, or that's William's dad, or something like that, which is terrific. I really like that. So people know what I do, but they're not impressed by it, and after all, why should they be? And to start the programme, this is electronic. It's also damaged.